guess what I can smell? I can smell sweaty hockey gear and sweaty hockey locker rooms already. We are getting so close to NHL preseason. Rookie camp gets announced. The uniforms are starting to take shape, and we're seeing the home kits. Oh, man, it is September, and we are just about a month away from the first Utah NHL inaugural season. This is the Clean Hits Podcast. This is your host, Brad. We got Kenny, Trent, Corey. We got the entire crew here. And we also like to call ourselves the cult of Bill Armstrong. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a little trip down memory lane and revisit 5 of Bill Armstrong's best trades he has ever made. But before we jump into that, how's everybody doing? Trent, how's it going?
Yeah, man, it's funny you should say smelling the smells of stinky locker rooms. It was 10U evals last night, so I was definitely smelling some of those smells myself. Like, ooh, geez. Those little ones definitely don't clean their gear out and air it out properly. So definitely a little ode to hockey last night. But looking forward today to talking about the king, the man himself, Bill Armstrong, and all the fleecings that he's been putting forth upon the league since he joined the club as a general manager.
Yep, absolutely. Corey, how are you doing up there?
Yeah, like you said, getting close to the hockey season here. I actually saw a billboard in Toronto here today, 34 days to the start of the season. So, I mean, it was big 34 for Austin Matthews' jersey number, but obviously you want to talk about another team who wears blue, not those Maple Leafs.
Yeah. Nice, exactly, perfect. And Kenny, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. This is day 2 of I hired a fitness coach, so I'm a little hangry.
Ooh.
I'm down to like 1,900 calories a day for the next couple of weeks. So,
wow.
Yeah, and then I'm sore everywhere. So it's cool. It's only gonna be like a 95-day gig, but it's required a lot of attention, and I can't wait for hockey to be on for a distraction because I am hungry all the time. So
yeah, that's 95 days better than anything I've done. So good for you.
Right.
Still only the other three of us. The other 3 of us should eat during the podcast.
Oh yeah, don't do that, please.
Well, man, it seems like yesterday with all the news, things are getting really exciting again. And I think it's the perfect time to just kind of set the stage of what the Utah fans can get excited about, because I think you could make an argument that right now, General Manager Bill Armstrong is probably near the top of the list of general managers in the league. Now, one thing that we haven't seen him do yet is kind of navigate a competitive team. Yeah. So when he got brought into the Arizona Coyotes franchise, he replaced John Chychrun, who was, kind of known as the whiz kid, the new up-and-coming general manager of the league. And at that point, kind of that Chychrun rebuild 1.0 was kind of showing its faults. And Bill Armstrong said, instead of kind of doing a remodel here, we got to take it down to the studs. So he stripped this team down. Trent and I were talking about the blue line, the defensive core, the other day, and shockingly, Juuso Välimäki is the longest tenured defenseman on this team. And he's only been here for 2 years. So that is kind of the level of which Bill Armstrong really broke down everything in order to kind of rebuild it, give it a new life, give it a new lease on life. And what we want to do is talk about 5 of those trades. One thing we are not doing today is talking about, players he drafted, waiver wire claims, kind of the rest of the moves, quote unquote. What we're really doing is focusing on those trades that he made. So I guess without further ado, should we just hop right in?
Let's do it.
Hop in.
All right. Excellent. First up, we are going kind of in chronological order. So the initial year Armstrong came over to the team, he always talks about in interviews too, it was definitely an evaluation year. He kind of allowed the roster to just do its thing. If you remember correct, the year before that, the team actually made what was called the quote unquote playoffs, because it was the COVID year where the whole league shut down for about the last month or 3 weeks of the season. And then they had a play-in round for teams that were almost in the playoffs. The Coyotes beat the Nashville Predators and played their first playoff series since 2012 against the Colorado Avalanche, who
bloodbath,
embarrassed us.
Absolute bloodbath. It was one of the worst.
Yeah, every game we lost by a touchdown. It was crazy. Yeah.
It wasn't just the score. It was just humiliating across the board. That was, of all the Coyotes playoff series losses, of which there are many from those early days, none was quite so emasculating as that one.
Just the volume of saves by Darcy Kemper in that series. It must have been, I think it was a 5-game series, but it was probably close to 200 shots against.
Yeah,
I think that's bad.
I think that's why Sakic eventually wanted him. Like, hey, bud, we feel bad for you. Come over here and win a cup with us. So,
we've seen what you can do.
Yeah. Right.
And after kind of that evaluation year, they did miss the playoffs in kind of that crazy COVID season. And at that point, everything started coming down. And this is when he really used the amount of cap space the team had to his advantage. And what you're about to see is just some highway robbery of several teams across the league. So we're going to start off with his dealings with the New York Islanders. If you are not listening to the podcast, we do have some nice big graphics. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram. We're going to be kind of posting those throughout the week so you can see some nice, clean, if you will, graphics of these trades. But the first one was Andrew Ladd came over to the Coyotes at the time for a second-round pick in the 2021 draft, which turned into J.J. Moser, a 2022 conditional second-round pick, and a 2023 conditional third-round pick, which turned into Tanner Lutke. The Islanders got future considerations, and we'll never know to this day what it is. Knowing that he was dealing with Lou Lamoriello, maybe he was sending over a couple extra razor blades to make sure that all of his players could make sure they are clean shaven before each game. I'm not exactly totally sure what that ended up being, but you got to think too, we have a little asterisk here. That 2022 conditional second round pick was packaged for the 11th overall pick that was owed by the San Jose Sharks during the 2022 draft to help the team move up to select Connor Geekie. Now, both J.J. Moser and Connor Geekie are not on this team anymore because they were, quite frankly, the most significant pieces of acquiring Mikhail Sergachev in the blockbuster trade that we saw this offseason. And unfortunately, right now, we can't really evaluate that Mikhail Sergachev trade. So that will be kind of brought up and reevaluated as we go down the road and seeing his impact on the team. So that doesn't make the cut yet. That may be the king of all of his trades down the road, but right now it's too hard. We can't exactly say how that turned out. But this trade really set the stage to be able to pull off that trade, and I think this really kind of set the tone of what Bill Armstrong was looking for during this teardown. And on top of it, Ladd was pretty good for the team that year. What do you guys think of it?
Yeah, that's the key. That was the thing I wanted to mention in all of this is Andrew Ladd ended up being a beneficial member of the team. It was a very bad team. It was a team that got beat handedly throughout the season, and he was a good leader with championship credentials, who was a gritty performer. I remember he was dropping the gloves and fighting guys and sticking up for teammates in a tank season. They were trying to lose, and this dude could not help himself but show up for games and be like an impassioned blood and guts leader that I would welcome on any team as long as I wasn't facing any cap issues, which the Coyotes, of course, were not. So to be paid that massive price for a net benefit player, pretty incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, the way you look at it is when you boil it down, we sent them a pack of used Cole socks, like future considerations, right? Like, and we get Andrew Ladd again, who, must have Trent's point. He provided a good locker room presence. And then you get an 11th overall pick and an 81st overall pick. If you look at that, it's kind of wild. I mean, you get those for free, and then one of those 11th overall picks turns out to be a pillar in acquiring Sergachev. They're not going to do that Sergachev trade without JJ Moser. They needed a warm body on the back. And I believe Brisebois did mention that the reason why they wanted to do this trade is they wanted to get a younger roster. Well, I understand, wanting a younger roster. I don't necessarily know if Connor Geeky's going to be stepping into the team on Tampa Bay this year. So when you hear that, it sounded like JJ Moser was a integral part. He was honed in by Brisebois. So just to think that we're sitting here today with Sergachev and a couple of years of watching Moser, who was a fun player to watch, all came from a cap dump from Andrew Ladd, a cap dump from New York Islanders, and of all people, he robbed one of the people that you don't want to rob. I'm pretty sure that guy's an actual mob boss. So bravo.
And just the other thing too on Andrew Ladd, not only veteran experience, but 2-time Stanley Cup winner, wins a Stanley Cup in his first season with Carolina, then he wins another during the Blackhawks dynasty. I remember players like Clayton Keller were talking about his impact on the room and his impact just as a veteran voice in the room. And the other thing too is it was a comeback story with him too, right? He had missed 2 seasons with his huge slew of injuries. I think he was nominated for the Masterton as well, and it was a comeback story for him, and it was an opportunity to play and an opportunity to show that that the franchise had a role for a player like this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that players talk, right? It's a tight-knit community. Andrew Ladd's definitely one of the good ones and a guy that everybody's rooting for. And for the Coyotes to step up and give him an opportunity to go out on his own terms rather than have his career cut short by injury, I think speaks volumes. And I think this was really the beginning of Bill Armstrong turning the narrative around. There was some really negative brand equity around the team. There always has been, but not just from an ownership perspective, from a management perspective in those days. And I think that Bill Armstrong made a move here that was not only astute in terms of collecting assets, but I think in gaining a little bit of credibility and trust back from the fraternity that is the players, right? So I think that was a big key there. And, obviously the pick we got back, that second, wasn't the key piece in the trade to move up for Geeky, but we wouldn't have moved up for Geeky without it. So I think really, all things considered, a pretty amazing package to get. And, don't discount Tanner Ludke either. I think Jonathan Castagna is getting a lot of tire pumps, a lot of press lately for the big season he had because his team was good and qualified for the tournament, and he shined in it. But prior to the tournament, Ludke and Castagna were kind of neck and neck in terms of who was having the better freshman season. So that'll be an interesting storyline to watch as well, as just how good of a prospect Ludke can end up being for this team.
Yeah, both being center prospects for the team, which is always extremely valuable. One last piece about Ladd that I want to bring up too before we move on to the next trade. There was a moment that I think Clayton Keller's complete career changed, and it was after he took a big hit against the boards, and Ladd came skating down the ice, and I don't remember who hit him, but threw down the gloves and went full fisticuffs with that player. And I swear, ever since that play, Keller had more confidence than he's ever had before. He was not as afraid to go into the dirty areas. He was not as afraid to cut through center ice, even if that meant he was going to potentially take another big hit to try to make a good shot or complete well-crafted play. I really felt that kind of energized him, sparked the team. And previous to when Bill Armstrong kind of came in, it was a team that didn't have much of a backbone, I have to say. There was a lot of times OEL took the brunt of so many heavy hits and nobody would stand up for him. And that was just kind of this aha moment, especially for some of the younger players on the team that, oh, you know what? We got people who have our back. We got people who believe in us and are willing to defend us. And man, I still remember that. And ever since that season, Keller's been a completely different player than he was the previous couple with the Rick Tocchet era.
Every GM in the league talks about culture. They all talk about it. Even the teams with the worst culture in the whole league talk about how important culture is. It's the buzzword, right? But I think what you're describing there is what happens when you put your money where your mouth is and you actually mean what you say when you talk about turning around the culture of an organization. And you can see it pay dividends in what a tremendous asset Clayton Keller has turned out to be. And some of those other younger players who got to learn from the example of Andrew Ladd, who is a grizzled veteran who'd made it to the top of the mountain not once but twice. And I think that's another reason why Bill Armstrong has continued to add those kinds of winning pedigree to the roster this offseason. I mean, it's clear that his whole plan is bringing in playoff experience and championship pedigree to this offseason. And I think that Andrew Ladd, in some ways, was the kicking off point for that philosophy for this organization.
Yeah. And quick shout out to Andrew Ladd. Ever since he's retired, I think he did this in his later years as well. He created a foundation for youth to have access for mental health and physical health well-being. So it's a Ladd Foundation 1616. So classic good guy story and worth checking out.
Very cool. Well, before we move on to our next trade, I do want to give a plug for the Clean Hits blog. If you want to find all of our written content, make sure you go to cleanhits.substack.com. We have articles, several articles, 3 to 4 articles a week. Right now, we're in the midst of doing our player profiles with preseason grades, so you can see exactly how we rank all the Utah Hockey Club players from their previous season and kind of what they will need to do to maybe improve their grade, hold on to their grade, and hopefully for a lot of these players, they're not going to get a lower grade than they had in the previous season. And then, of course, you can find us on Twitter/X at Clean Hits Hockey. Same thing for Instagram, Clean Hits Hockey. And then, of course, we are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you want to digest our content, we got you covered. So again, make sure you give us a like, subscribe, engage with us. We love interacting with everybody. And, you know, that's how we grow this community around this team that is just building up a incredible future that I think is going to have a lot of sustained success. So moving right along, again, we're doing chronological order. Was this next one on the same day as the Andrew Ladd trade?
Gostisbehere?
Yep.
5 days later, but still a busy week.
Okay. I knew it was very around the same time frame. And this one was very exciting. I think a lot of people were scratching their heads of why it went down this way. Gostisbehere, I remember at some point Philly fans saying was better than Keith Yandel or just an untouchable asset to the team. And then out of nowhere, really, I don't even remember if Gostisbehere was in trade rumors. He got moved to Arizona for a 2022 second round pick, which ended up being Artem Duda, which is a defenseman that is still in the prospect pool and will be making his AHL debut this season for the Tucson Roadrunners. A 2022 seventh round pick. And Philly got, guess what? Some future considerations again. And then, of course,
Future Considerations is going to have a Hall of Fame career, though. Future Considerations.
no kidding. No kidding.
It's a little bit of a suitcase.
And that 2022 seventh round pick actually became Sam Lipkin, who is yet another player who is going to be making his AHL debut this season for the Tucson Roadrunners. He's a winger who had a very good collegiate career. And then on top of that, Gostisbehere was moved 2 seasons ago for a third round pick in 2026 to Carolina. So again, this is one of those pieces and situations where doesn't have to give up anything. He gets a player who became a valuable asset for a rebuilding team, became a leader, was able to help kind of shore up the defense, was a PP specialist, and really kind of had a resurgence of his career in Arizona for the 2 years he was here, and didn't have to do anything to get him.
Yeah, it really took off in Arizona, and it was a weird sequence of events that led to the trade too. Because remember, Philly brought in Ristolainen, and then they needed to clear a space on the back end, so they moved out Gostisbehere. Gostisbehere comes into Arizona. This is the first year where OEL's gone. Jacob Chychrun's still not ready to really take on those top pair minutes, especially on the power play. And Gostisbehere has a rebound. He's got 51 points. It's the second highest in his career. He has 14 goals, which I think was 6th best among all NHL defensemen. And really showed that he was not a traditional captain. Like, he could still play. I mean, obviously Andrew Ladd played, but like, this was still a regular guy. He was on the first power play unit. I mean, the team wasn't very good, but still he showed he could play. Played 2 seasons in Arizona. The next season took a bit of a dip, but he also missed some time too, I think, with a pretty serious injury there. So I missed a good chunk of time, but really had a strong rebound in Arizona. And then they were able to cash in and move him out for another pick down the road to Carolina.
Stacking assets upon assets.
Yeah.
It's go ahead, Trent.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that asset stacking has allowed the flexibility to do some things. Now, they didn't move these picks specifically out for, a guy like John Marino, but having the stockpile of prospects and future picks, getting a second and a third and a seventh, a promising seventh that we converted into Sam Lipkin, probably gives the front office the confidence to make a move like moving a pair of seconds out for John Marino, or picking up Sean Durzi last offseason for a second. A rebuilding team is not normally moving picks, but this team is able to add young roster pieces that are part of the core because of the huge stockpile that they have.
Yeah. And yeah, just it's wild to me that again, this guy was acquired for free. He made the team watchable. He made it fun. I mean, you see, he got a pretty decent paycheck. I think Detroit signed him for 1 year, right? And then it was just a 1-year deal. But he put up 56 points there. So to Brad's point, he had a couple bad years in Philly, but came here and had a career resurgence, and just kind of goes to show you our pro scouting team believed in the guy. And then Bill executed. He said, you know what, I'm gonna make them give him to us for free, and get a couple other draft assets in return as well. And everybody laughs at Armstrong for like acquiring a second round pick in 2052, but I mean, you think about it, those are trade chips, like Trent said.
Yeah.
It's he knows what he's doing, and it's actually been kind of outstanding to watch. In the moment, you're like sitting there like, man, we're not going to reap these rewards for a couple of years. And then you see like 6 months later, we got an actual roster player from it. So this is another one of those trades. This is one of my favorite trades that he's done. It's up there. It might be my top 3.
Yeah, it's such a fleet, because Gostisbehere was literally the best defenseman on the team during his time in Arizona.
Arguably, like
the best defenseman over the entirety of his career here, and they got paid to take him. Which, is an interesting thing. Gostisbehere to me is a little bit of a cautionary tale too, right? Like when we were talking about the 2024 entry draft, and we were thinking about different players they might draft, and some of these top prospects out there. This type of defenseman seems to be a little bit underappreciated on the trade market, right? We were able to pick up Sean Durzi for just 1 second-round pick, and he's been such an impactful player and such a good part of the future. Shayne Gostisbehere has never seemingly had value. Even when we traded him after he'd been our best defenseman for 2 seasons, we only got a third for him. Philly had to pay to get rid of him. Despite the fact that he's had a very good career. It's interesting that these undersized offensive defensemen who are kind of power play specialists seem to not carry a whole lot of value throughout the league. So that's something to keep an eye on when we're paying attention to draft picks, right? We saw some undersized defensemen go a little bit early in the draft, and you have to wonder, is there going to be some diminishing returns there? So another piece of the philosophy with this front office is that as much as we've needed defensemen and we kind of expect them to pick them, if it's not the right one at the draft, they're not afraid to go forward or go size or just pick the best asset.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good point.
Size matters. Before we jump into our next 3, I have to just pop this up on the screen. So again, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, we quickly drew up the old Grim Reaper meme with Bill Armstrong as the Reaper himself, knocking on the doors of the 3 Canadian teams we're about to, with the 3 doors of the Canadian teams open, with the blood coming out of the Montreal Canadiens, Vancouver Canucks, and Ottawa Sens, and knocking on the door of the Tampa Bay Lightning. These next 3 trades ended 3 general managers' careers at the team that they were on when they went down. Just ruthless. And we will start off with none other than the OEL trade that really sent Jim Benning home and really made a huge statement of where this team was going. This was the captain of the Arizona Coyotes, the only other captain outside of Shayne Doan, and it was done on the afternoon of the 2021 NHL draft, which the Coyotes famously did not have a first-round pick for because of John Chychrun shenanigans. If you want to look up what Stretchgate is, you'll have a better understanding of how ridiculous this whole thing was. But Oliver Ekman-Larsson, fan favorite captain, the Norris contending defenseman and some of his best seasons, and fan favorite Connor Garland, who is an absolute spitfire and had a hell of a playoff for the Canucks this postseason, were moved for a laundry list of Jay Beagle, Louis Eriksson, Antoine Roussel, the 2009 overall pick, or 2021, sorry, 9th overall pick, a 2022 second round pick, and a 2023 7th round pick. To me, this was the welcome to the rebuild Bill Armstrong's way, that he was willing to take even more cap dumps. All three of these players played games for the team, and I would almost say that Beagle may have been the most effective player out of the three. We'll get into that in a little bit, but more importantly, that 9th overall pick in the 2021 NHL draft turned into Dylan Guenther. Can you imagine Dylan Guenther on Pettersson's wing? No, I cannot, because he is a Utah Hockey Club player. And then our 2022 second round pick from the Canucks ended up being traded for Jack McPain, if you will. And then the 2023 7th round pick was traded to San Jose for a 2022 7th round pick, which ended up being Adam Zelenka, who I actually do not know much about, shockingly. But this one really was the blockbuster. I remember it completely ruined my entire day as far as trying to get anything done productively. I mean, it was so exciting going into this draft class, not having a first, wondering if we're going to find some way to get maybe into the late first to move up, or what we were going to do with day 2 with the second round picks that we had just acquired. But that was about all you're really looking forward to. And then boom, we are drafting a top prospect.
Yeah. You know, I remember the reactions to this trade very vividly. Yeah, it was Canucks fans just celebrating like, oh my God, I can't believe he took on all of our bad contracts.
Yeah.
And we got Connor Garland and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. We only took one bad contract back, etc. Like I just remember reading, I'm like, man, you guys have no idea what your that contract is massive, and it's for a lot more years. All these guys, if I remember correctly, were on bad contracts, but we needed the cap. We needed to get to the cap floor, and they only had one more year. So it was their final year. So it was a masterclass. It was like, you know, it was the short game but long game at the same time. And I just remembered it stung to give up Garland a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I love Oliver as a person. I'm psyched that he won the cup. Seems like an overall good guy, and but he just wasn't a fit in Arizona anymore. He wasn't the right captain choice. It wasn't doing him any favors staying in Arizona. It wasn't doing us any favors keeping him. But overall, the initial sting was more on the Garland front. But he kind of had a weird fall off too. I mean, again, like you said, he was kind of a buzzsaw in the playoffs for them, but he's never really lived up to the player we all thought he was going to be. So to have a future, piece to your team. You can imagine Dylan Guenther's going to be here in Utah for a long time. And any Utah fans out there that are new to hockey, this guy, keep your eye on him. You're not going to have to look hard. He's going to be all over the ice. He has an amazing shot. So this is by far and away my favorite trade Bill Armstrong's ever done. And it's still kind of when you see it on paper. So thank you, Corey, for making that beautiful graphic there. It's kind of wild to relive it again.
And I think really the other two things that stand out to me about this trade is going into that draft, Owen Power he was going to go number 1, but then there was kind of a group of 8, 9, 10 guys who could go in any order in that top 10. There was some people who had Dylan Guenther second overall. I mean, we got him 9th, but I mean, if you got him second, it wouldn't have been a stretch. And the other thing that really stands out to this deal, and we saw it with the two we previously talked about, Andrew Ladd, Lou Lamoriello's backed into a corner. He's got to get rid of the contract. Philadelphia's backed in the contract, backed into the corner with the Gostisbehere contract, got to get rid of it. And then this deal, OEL was only willing to go to 2 teams. Boston wasn't willing to put up what we wanted. Vancouver was all over OEL for more than a year, right? If you go back the year before, there was rumors that Bill Armstrong was asking for a package with Thatcher Demko and some other pieces, but I don't know if those negotiations continued for a year or not, or they were revisited, but Armstrong didn't have a lot of leverage. He only had 2 teams in the bidding. Boston wasn't really that interested, and he still came out with this package. So there's part of me who wonders if that no trade clause didn't exist, then like what was the return going to be for this? It would have been even way better. But I mean, still obviously impressed with the return, but just wild that with only 2 teams as a possible landing spot, that they were still able to get this as the return.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about the previous summer. BA was kind of smoke dropped into this situation with an active trade request and a deadline of July 1 to trade OEL, and only 2 teams he was willing to go to. BA was asking for a fortune. The rumor was Demko or Swayman from either team. There was a lot of rumors about what could have been included, and one of those was Vasily Podkolzin from Vancouver. And if BA had been impatient and pulled the trigger as a brand new GM who was running out of time, the clock was running when he inherited this mess, he could have ended up with Vasily Podkolzin instead of Dylan Guenther. Podkolzin, by the way, was just traded for a 4th-round pick. So that patience paid off tremendously. He ends up with Dylan Guenther, who is the partner in crime for Logan Cooley. Guenther getting called up turned Cooley's season around. These dynamic duos are such a thing in the league, and these two are so good for each other. And Logan Cooley is like the franchise player. To get a perfect complement that helps him bring it up a level is so key for our fundamental success, like our foundational success. Dylan Guenther's going to have to play a big role in that. And we got it for a player in OEL who was ultimately bought out by the GM that replaced Benning, who got fired for acquiring OEL, right? So pretty lopsided trade, and that's not even bringing in McBain into the equation. So I'd ask you this, as Utah fans, not as a team looking to win the Stanley Cup this year, but as Utah fans, if you could have either Jack McBain or Connor Garland on this team, which one would you choose?
I know who I would choose, and it's McBain. I mean, McBain is a potential future shutdown center, young. He brings size, he brings grit. I love Connor Garland's flash in the pan offense, but he's a smaller guy, and this team needs a player like McBain. So that's who I would choose. I'm sure.
Yeah, I feel like you win more games in the playoffs with McBain types. I mean, who knows if Utah is going to make the playoffs this year? But I mean, we just kind of discussed it there with the smaller defensemen, right? Part of the reason their value isn't as high is because things get a little tighter in the playoffs. Small defensemen are kind of easy to rub out. And, same with the small forwards, right? Connor Garland is probably one of the smallest forwards in the league. Plays bigger than his size, but still, I mean, small. And Jack McBain is not. And that's the type of player you need in the playoffs. And he's a center over a wing.
True.
Yep.
Yes, it's a real tough one. I definitely have a soft spot for Garland still. And
yeah,
man, if you do any sort of sports betting, anytime he plays the Coyotes, and we'll have to see if he pulls it through with the Utah Hockey Club too, he just wrecks the team. I mean, his shot props always hit. He almost always has a point. Just look at his games against the Coyotes. It's wild. But yeah, I mean, as far as the age of McBain and obviously the size and even the position he plays, that's all more important for this younger team. So yeah, it hurts to say it, but I think McBain is the person you want on the team right now and at the stage that the team's in and potentially the type of player who's going to be a little bit more valuable than Garland in the long run. It's pretty wild.
Plus, he looks like a doppelganger.
So
right, he looks like Bill Armstrong's son. Do we have the picture of the signing? It looked like father and son holding up the McBain jersey.
It's true.
I never made that connection.
I would take McBain too, and just the fact that it's close, right? Because Garland ended up being the only real value they got out of the trade. So it's sort of if McBain and Garland is a wash, then we got Dylan Guenther basically for free because OEL only disappointed there and then was bought out.
Well, there's one caveat, and it still pisses me off. And I almost wish that it's the one thing that didn't follow the team to Utah is when Vancouver bought out OEL, the Coyotes, and now Utah still lose a retention spot because of that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a story for a different day. I don't want to bore anybody with retention.
It's a big nerd. What is?
Yeah, it's a big nerd. Yeah. I didn't want to put a damper on it, but that's of course no fault of our own. That's Vancouver, buying out a player that they just purchased. So but can I make one more quick point on this trade? And it's because Trent, you brought it up, and it kind of goes with the theme of this off season. I do remember them asking for Demko, and I do remember that they were looking at Swayman as well. I would keep that at the forefront of our brains right now because there is something that Bill Armstrong has identified, and it was further proven this offseason when we were in the running for Askarov. He seems to have his eyes set and has over the last couple of years of acquiring a young goaltender that this team can build around. So it might be worth, keeping our eyes on the names of people out there. So sorry to make this one go a little bit longer, but Trent, that was a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Jacob Chychrun rumors, another deal we'll get to here shortly. Florida was hot and heavy, and the rumor was we wanted Spencer Knight. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Of course, we drafted Michael Robel early in the second round. That may be satisfying Bill Armstrong, but the interest in Askarov says maybe not. So something to keep an eye on. Great point, Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
And here's that picture of Bill Armstrong with Jake McBain.
Who pointed this out? How am I not noticed this yet? That is insane.
Yeah.
Like the same size and everything. That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh man. We'll definitely have to tweet that one out too. So moving right along. So let's pull up our Reaper again. First story here is the Montreal Canadiens, and oh boy, this one was a little bit of a roller coaster. So it was Christian Dvorak, who I think we, as Coyotes fans, all were hoping and thinking he was really going to become a very valuable 2C, maybe a 55-point type, 20-goal, really defensively responsible center. And we got one of the craziest first-round conditional picks that you could have asked for, along with a 2024 second-round pick for him. I do think this one stung a lot because I think we were all really hoping that Dvorak was going to be one of those guys that kind of help bridge the rebuilds and give the young kids support and kind of be a core player. But when you look at kind of the way this all falls down to, I don't think anybody's too concerned with the way it worked out because that first round pick ended up being packaged to move up for Connor Geekie, and the second round pick was traded to the Los Angeles Kings for Sean Durzi. I mean, at this point, I think a lot of people would be fine with, and maybe even wildly happy with, Durzi for Dvorak straight up. But then you got that first round pick, which was again used to move up to grab Connor Geekie, which was then later used to move to acquire Sergachev. The why I was saying that this was kind of a roller coaster, however, was the conditions of the first round pick, and correct me if I'm a little off here, was that Montreal could defer it to Carolina's pick, which they received from the Kotkaniemi offer sheet, if their first round was top 10 protected, right? If their first round was in the top 10, and this was a team that was coming off a Stanley Cup appearance. So I think a lot of Coyotes fans, Utah fans at the time were really kind of expecting it to maybe be in the early teens, maybe that Montreal would have kind of snuck into the playoffs and had an early exit. But unfortunately, they had a pretty disastrous season, which kind of kicked off their rebuild. They actually ended up drafting first overall that year and got Slavkovsky. And that kind of let us have to take on the Carolina first instead, which ended up being, I think, 30th overall, because this was the year Seattle joined the league, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong with some of those details, but obviously Jersey for Dvorak straight up would have been fantastic. What do you guys think of this one?
I think just similar to the other trades, again, another GM backed into a corner. Bergevin loses his center and Kotkaniemi, and this deal happened in September too, right? So training camp just around the corner. Bill Armstrong happens to have a center available. Montreal needs one, and you can command a high price for it because not a lot of teams are moving centers in September.
Yeah, I think it's you laid it out pretty well, Brad. I think that this was just one of those situations where we knew we could take advantage of a team that was in desperation for a center, and Bill again just took advantage of the situation and got the best return he could. So there's not, the players that we indirectly got from this trade are, it's kind of outstanding to see that now, but at the time, Dvorak for a first and a second, you take that all day.
Yeah, it ended up being an instrumental part of the Sergachev acquisition. Ended up being important in acquiring Sean Durzi. So you could argue that the two most valuable defensemen on the team are in some way, shape, or form products of this one move to sell high on Dvorak, who never seemed to capture that junior magic he had with the London Knights that we all hoped he would.
Fun player to watch react to goals, though, because he never reacted to goals. So that's one thing. He might be serial killer, but
he's absolutely deadpan. It's the strangest thing ever. He'll score a game-winning goal and won't crack a smile. Yeah.
Yay. That was fun.
Any other comments about the Dvorak trade? Obviously, Durzi was such a great piece to be able to obtain from that second round pick. And it's kind of interesting when you look at these, how many times the second round pick that often was deferred several years back ended up being one of the most integral pieces of the trade. But moving on to kind of the last of the big five, and this is one of the most recent ones that he did. And this one stung. I think a lot of the Coyotes fans saw the writing on the wall with Jacob Chychrun, who kind of had captain material written all over him. He seemed like he wanted to be in Arizona up until a lot of his buddies got traded, like Dvorak, and all of a sudden he wasn't as excited about being in part of a long rebuild. And this one seemingly took all season to happen in 2023, because there were rumors right from the get-go, right from that start of the season. Did Chychrun actually request a trade? I think he did, but
yes.
Regardless, he was moved to Ottawa for a 2023 first round pick, a 2024 conditional second round pick, and a 2026 second round pick. So 2 second round picks and a first round pick. I think all of us became Ottawa fans after this trade happened, because I guess hoping that Ottawa was going to just crash and burn, rather, watching all their games meticulously, because the lower it could have gone, the better for us. Was that top 10 protected, though?
Yes.
Yes. So it was kind of a win one, lose one situation when we were watching scoreboards with Ottawa. And luckily they kind of petered out to that 12th overall pick, which allowed us to draft Daniel Boot. And that 2024 second round pick was packaged to New Jersey for John Marino. So another trade where the second round pick helps us acquire a defenseman that is on the roster and a first-round pick that allows us to draft a giant human, which is definitely BA's MO. So thoughts on this trade?
I think the two things that stand out about this trade to me is, you remember at the time the rumor was Bill Armstrong was looking for 2 first-round picks and potentially a second or some other piece. And then we heard after the fact from Armstrong that this was actually a better deal, 1 first and 2 seconds, because to get that Ottawa first when it's really high up the draft board, getting 12th overall rather than, a cup contender is going to offer you a 25th overall this year and a 25th overall next year. It's not as valuable when you can pick. It's really hard to trade up into the top half of the draft. So to do that was huge. And then the other thing that really stands out is how much Jakob Chychrun's value has dropped in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
If you take one of the other, they traded him this summer for Nick Jensen. Is John Marino the better defenseman in this deal already?
Yeah.
Even you take out the other pieces, like Ottawa definitely would have done Chychrun for Marino over Nick Jensen. So it's wild how much Chychrun's value has fallen off, and a pending free agent now too, I believe. So he could be on another team in a year from now.
Yeah,
Utah.
and I think that late first versus two late firsts and future drafts versus an immediate 12th overall pick is an astute observation, Corey. And I remember in the reactions of this trade, it was really convenient for people telling on themselves and not really understanding trade value, because they're like, oh man, he said he was going to get 2 firsts and he only got 1 in a couple of seconds. And it's like, yeah, dude, it's the 12th overall. We just saw literally like a draft ago what the cost was to move up for Connor Geekie at 11th overall. It's a tremendous price to pay to move up from that position. And you don't have to tell me that the value was there. In my prospect rankings, I kind of ruffled some feathers by putting Daniil Boot number 2 on my list behind only Tija Ginla. This is a team that's been rebuilding for years, that drafts very well, has a dream team of scouts at the helm, and picked a kid with this pick that I feel confident enough to put at number 2 on my list. I think at worst, he's going to be 3 or 4 on any list, which says a lot. This is kind of one of the crown jewels of the rebuild, and we got it for a player that was just traded for literally nothing.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. This one did sting.
It did. At the time, it was a little bit of a feel bad. But
yeah. I think just due to the fact that there was one thing, again, if you're new to hockey, this is kind of new to a lot of hockey fans. One thing that my favorite aspect of this trade is that this was the trade that broke the internet with the trade related reasons. So if you're looking for transparency out of any general manager, of course, it would have been Bill Armstrong that started this trend of transparency, where players used to be scratched for undisclosed reasons. I think Jakob Chychrun got scratched for like a whole month and a half, or like a month before he was actually traded. And per the PR release, it said for trade related reasons, and everybody was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is, and then like Bill Armstrong's like, what are you gonna do? I'm like 6'5", dude, come at me. But it's just that was probably my favorite thing, because it happened. Now it happens everywhere. Like everybody's getting scratched for trade related reasons. But this trade kind of reminds me of that, that meme of Charlie Day and Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's like, I got the conspiracy board behind him, and he's like, Bill Armstrong has a plan. No matter how many years out, he's got a plan. And we're seeing a piece of this trade, round out our top pairing with Marino, and Danny Goals is by far and away one of my favorite prospects I've ever seen. No big man should be able to move and skate like he does, and his shot's unreal. So this is it's still a little fresh to me because I love Chychrun, and I still don't know what's going on with him. Maybe it's all that liver he's eating. Maybe he's got to change his diet up a little bit. But yeah, exactly. His Instagram is wild. I don't know if you guys see it. It's like nuts. But yeah, it's Jakob Chychrun's fall off is kind of one to be studied, as you guys said. So we'll keep an eye on that. But overall, the net here looks pretty outstanding.
And Pierre Dorion will be keeping a close eye on Jakob Chychrun's career, because he has plenty of time to do that from the couch, as he is no longer employed as a result of this trade, which completes the trifecta that you see here of Ottawa, Vancouver, and Montreal being just absolute victims of Bill Armstrong. So that begs the question. Tampa is not Canadian, but their general manager is. So should somebody be nervous?
We will see. That one feels pretty fair right now, and we'll have to. Time will tell, but you never know.
Yeah, it almost felt wrong putting him on there, but it's something to keep our eye on because that was a pretty massive trade. So,
yep.
Also, we needed a fourth door. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it couldn't have been opened yet. So,
yeah exactly.
Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed that. We may need to do another episode where we break down the quote unquote Bill Armstrong moves. So the waiver wire pickups, maybe some of the draft selections and some of the more savvy things that he's done outside of the trades. But hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode of the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast. Again, don't forget, we do have articles that come out multiple times a week on cleanhits.substack.com. You can find us on Twitter /X at Clean Hits Hockey, on Instagram at Clean Hits Hockey. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We got you covered if you want to be as obsessed with the Utah Hockey Club as we are. And again, we got tons and tons of great content lined up for the regular season. And if you want to learn a lot more about those prospects we talked about, see our prospect rankings, again, all of that can be found on our Substack. We've ranked all the top prospects in the farm. We've ranked all the players who are 25 years or younger as well. So tons of great content to get you caught up, to know everything you need to know about the team. Impress all your friends out there before that puck drops on October 8th. But before we go, we do want to give one more shout out, and I do want to give the microphone over to Trent to do that.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Hey, so Brad mentioned our Discord and the community that we're building online. And I encourage everybody to join that. A lot of people have joined it. It's popping in there. We've got 100 members in there talking hockey, seemingly 24/7. We got people in Australia. We've got people in Canada. We've got people in Arizona, in Salt Lake City. Every time zone is represented in our Discord, and it's been an amazing community. There hasn't been a need for really any moderation or any warnings. People keep it really civil. People are really positive and upbeat. It's a kind of a nice respite from Twitter or X, right, where it can get a little gnarly. I feel like we have a really positive, upbeat community there, and we've had some additions to that community that were a little surprising. Some folks from Calgary fans, right, because we drafted TJ Ginla. And, Rod Anderson is a big time Calgary Flames fan. He lives in Salt Lake City. The Utah Hockey Club picks TJ Ginla. It's just this perfect stars aligned moment for him. He's a great contributor to our Discord and our community, and someone that we really appreciate. And then Sir Lunatic brings a whole bunch of color to the Discord. He's another Calgary transplant, has sort of adopted Utah as his second team. And I think that's one of the great things about being a team like the Utah Hockey Club is it's exciting. It's new. We're building fans from all over, but obviously there was some really tragic news in the hockey world that happened recently. And I know that we immediately thought about our new friends, our new community members who are Flames diehards because they lost one of their personal heroes, Johnny Gaudreau, who tragically died after being hit by a drunk driver along with his brother. Both of them passed away. And, Sir Lunatic, whose real name is Michael, penned a really touching letter that really kind of pays homage to Johnny Hockey and kind of explores some of the feelings that he has about what happened in New Jersey. And I did want to read just a little bit of it here. He'll post it on Twitter. We'll retweet it if you want to check it out. But just a little bit here from Michael. He says that on Tuesday evening, I was struck by an epiphany that hockey's always been my safe space. Bullied at school, hockey was there as an escape. Mentally abused at home, hockey kept me going. Broke up with my fiance, I had hockey to escape into. Losing my father, again, hockey was there, right? And this time, there's no safe space. I cannot escape into the game because I love Johnny Gaudreau, and he was such a big part of that. I think that's a big reason why his death has shaken the hockey landscape so dramatically. Hockey fandom can be a vice, right? It's an escape for all of us, and it helps us relax and shed the realities of everyday life. And when those two things overlap, there's nowhere to go. And I think that was a really poignant observation from him as to why I think that the Gaudreau tragedy was so deeply felt by everyone in the hockey community. He shares a lot more about his experience and his fandom of Johnny Gaudreau in that letter. So keep an eye out. We'll retweet that when he posts it. And I just wanted to take some time to recognize the tragedy that did occur in the hockey world last week, and let our Calgary friends know that we're thinking about them during this time.
Yeah, no, thank you for all the support you guys bring every day. And again, if anybody else wants to join that community, you can find our link to our Discord from our Twitter and our link tree. It's a little too long to try to explain on here, but give us a follow, come join, and definitely say hi to our Flames fans there. Show some support. And again, I think we're all heartbroken over that news. So
yeah, our prayers and healing energy go out to the Gaudreau family as well. It's awful.
Yep. Well, on that note, unfortunately, we are going to be wrapping this up. Again, go give your friends and loved ones a hug. Make sure you call your friends and loved ones and just let them know that you're thinking about them. Life is very, very fragile, and we can't wait to continue to experience life with all of our fans and friends here that we've met over the past couple months of starting this. And just cheers to the Gaudreau family, and let's all have a fantastic week and weekend, and we'll catch you next time, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.
We know we running it now. Watch the game change.